Welcome to this first video tutorial in the series of learning 3D Studio Max. This is a beginner's tutorial geared towards people that know absolutely nothing about this amazing program. Very complicated program, but still very intuitive and user-friendly once you get familiar with it. And that's what this tutorial is geared towards, is teaching you the basics, getting you familiar with the interface, and taking you through the basic steps, the basic creation of objects, geometry, just really kind of an introductory series so that you will be able to follow along easier with the other tutorials on my site, and allow you to explore your creativity with this program. So to get started, the first thing that you see when you run 3D Studio Max is you'll see we've got these four views. We have our typical menu bar running along the top, which with just clicking we can explore and expand the menu. We also have a toolbar that runs across here that you see when you move the mouse to an empty spot. You see the hand. You can click and drag with the left mouse and you can explore more of the toolbar. You will not have these three tools, these three buttons on your interface. These are buttons that I have made for my particular user interface. They are actually kind of covered in my forum. But you're not going to have these three, so don't worry about it. But as you can see, we have the ability to navigate and see all of this toolbar, and depending on your monitor and the resolution, if you've got a widescreen monitor with a very high resolution, then this sliding process won't happen because you'll actually be seeing enough of the toolbar, so you won't have to slide it. So we have our three views. The top, front, left view, as you can see, they have these very dominant grid patterns, and these are your orthographic views, or your blueprint-like views. There's absolutely no perspective in these views whatsoever. They're looking straight on. You're seeing from the left, straight on from the top, from the front. And then obviously here we have our perspective, and just left clicking in a view or right clicking in a view will make a particular view active. Once the view is active, we can come down here to the corner, and you can't see it on the video, but it will give you a tooltip, and it says maximize viewport toggle, and we click that and we see that our perspective view goes full screen. Now Alt W, holding the Alt and W key, is the hotkey, or the shortcut to activate our maximize toggle down here in the corner. And hotkeys are really going to be a very important thing for you to get familiar with when it comes to using 3D Studio Max, because it's going to make your life a lot easier when you know your shortcuts. Okay. Move on now to this area over here. This is your command panel, and by right click up here on our main toolbar, we see we have some options here, and we see we have our command panel. We can uncheck and we can get rid of that and have a nice big full screen here if we wanted to. So I'm going to go back and right click again and turn our command panel back on, and if we take a look at our command panel in the pieces, we see that we have these little tabs. What we'll come to realize is that a lot of what is over here in a visual layout, we have the Create tab here. We can see that geometry is active, so we're going to create geometry, and then we have a list here of different types of geometry we can create. So we can create geometry, standard primitives, and then these are our standard primitives that we can create. Go to extended primitives. These are the extended primitives that we can create. So this is a visual representation of the same things that we have along the top here. So we go create, standard primitives, box. So the same thing as coming over here. Now why do they have this? Because some people are maybe will not be familiar to using the command panel. They are maybe more familiar to Microsoft Windows or other typical software packages where these menus are how you get to things, and that's fine. But I've been using Macs for so long that the command panel is kind of what I've come to expect. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first area we have here. So create, then geometry, and then our standard primitives, and we come down here and we have box and all these different things. So I'm going to go ahead and click on box, left click, and as I move my mouse into the view, you'll see that my cursor has changed to a crosshair. You'll also notice that box is yellow, which shows us that we are currently in create mode for box. So if I left click and drag, you'll see, and you can read down on the command panel, that length and height are being adjusted for me right now as I'm dragging my mouse around. Notice the height isn't doing anything. So when I drag this out and I find a particular dimension or size that I would like and go for, I release the left mouse button, and now when I move the mouse, you'll see that I'm creating the height parameter. So whenever I find the height parameter that I like, I'll go ahead and left click again, and now I've created my box. But you'll notice that I'm still in create mode, so every time I can come over here and create another box and another box, and I can just keep going because I'm in create mode. That's the all the options that I have available to me when I'm in create mode. If I am ready to get out of create mode and I want to maybe start adjusting some of these parameters to these other boxes, notice I can't just try to click on them because I'm still in create mode. So I either have to go to the modify tab, which will get us out of create mode, and you'll notice that I am now no longer creating objects. Or we can simply, I'm going to go ahead and just delete these objects real quick. Okay, so I'm going to create me another box. Okay, so I can switch to the modify panel, or I can activate one of my tools. And one of the main ones that you're going to use is going to be your select and move, your select and rotate, or your select and scale, uniform scale. So if I immediately come to my move tool, we see that we get out of create mode, and now I can start moving and rotating this object and scaling it if I want. So create, we select on whatever it is, we come over here, we click and drag, and as long as we are in create mode, that is all our left mouse is going to do for us. We're just gonna keep creating spheres as we so desire. Now notice I'm gonna just go ahead and I have my move tool selected, and I'm going to just drag my mouse around all these guys here, and I will select all of them. Okay, now this brings me to another important aspect that we have to Macs and selecting objects and everything. Right here next to our move tool, we have this window crossing button, and you can see by looking at the little picture here, these dotted lines represent the dotted lines that we see when we make a selection. Okay, and this is telling us that our dotted lines are saying this black circle here is an object that we want to select. And notice that the black lines are saying if it just touches or crosses over this object, that object is going to be selected. So for example, if I come over here and select like this, the bottom line here is touching these two spheres. There's three spheres, so it's going to select them. Okay, if I click on it once, we see that it switches to the circle has to be completely inside of our marquee selection. So doing the same selection again is going to yield no selection. So only whatever is completely selected, completely inside of our marquee, is going to get selected. So it's a really cool way of getting very particular about selecting objects that you have here in your scene. It's really useful. You just want to remember to switch back and forth from it as your needs so desire. Okay, so I'm going to now move over to the next button here, which says the rectangular selection region. And as we see, that's set to a rectangle, so as we click and drag, we get a rectangle. Okay, if I click and hold, left click and hold, we see we get some more options here, and down at the bottom of the screen down here, it will tell us the name of the tool that we currently are picked on. So we see this is the circular selection, which obviously is going to give us circular selections. Okay, we'll go to the next one, which is the fence selection region, which what this is doing is I just left click and I'm dragging, and I can drag around, and I don't have to hold, I can just click, and now that's the selection there. So just click and drag once to get the line started, and then from that point on it's just a matter of left clicking to make our selection. The next one, which is one of the ones that I prefer, is the lasso selection region, which is this is the one we can just basically draw the selection around the objects that we want. And this will obviously all be dependent upon how we have the next button, which is our window crossing. And then finally we have the paint selection region, which this acts like a paintbrush, almost like Photoshop. Just click and hold the left mouse button, we see we have a brush size. And now I'm just clicking, and as I move my mouse over to objects, I'm basically painting on the screen all the objects that I want to have selected. Okay, we also have the ability to go just to the select tool. I prefer using the move tool to select objects because it immediately moves me. As soon as I select it, I'm immediately here in move mode with my gizmo, and I can start moving objects in different dimensions or whatnot. But there might be times where you just want to only select, and we see that when I use just my select object tool, I have no options. Left clicking is going to do anything. It's just going to keep me in my current selection region tool. But this is all that I can do to these objects. For example, notice how I'm clicking around these objects relatively fast. If I go to my move tool and do it, notice I can actually be moving my objects. So sometimes you might just want to select on them. Most of the time though, I think that you will probably prefer to have your move tool and you can select on them, as long as you are not going crazy like this and clicking everywhere really fast. And then here in the middle we have the select by name, which if we click that, it will open up a dialog for us where we can actually go in here and pick whatever particular object that we want, a group of them. We can select hold control and pick particular ones, hit OK, and it'll select those. You can also access that by hitting the H key on your keyboard, and we see that we can name, write a name of what we want to select. We have to show in the list all of these different objects. So let's say we've got a whole bunch of lights, and the only thing we want to do is select our lights. Well, then we could uncheck all of these and leave only the lights, and that's all that will show up in this list. As we can see, the only thing we have so far is geometry. So if we turn off display geometry, then obviously we have nothing. Okay, so that is the basics of selecting after we have created our objects. go ahead and I'm going to select all these objects, or we can hit Control A to select everything. I'm going to set this back to rectangle for now. I can also, if I select, say, these, and I do something to them, maybe I move these over here. Okay, I do whatever. And now I want to quickly select on everything else. Then I can come up here and go Edit, select Invert, which is Control I, and we see Control A is Select All. Select None, Control D, select Similar, Control Q, which would be the same thing, selecting similar for geometry, whatever. So let's say I'm going to select on these. I'm going to hit Control I. And we see it immediately selects just these guys. So now I can move these somewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these, and I'm going to go back to just one sphere. And I'll hit W to immediately get out of create mode and immediately into my move tool. And now we need to take a look at how we can actually rotate our view. If we come down here to the bottom, this bottom corner right here represents our camera tools. And we see the first one will be our zoom, so we click and drag and we see we can zoom in and out of this. This one right here is more for the when we are looking at all four views, which is what we can see here with these four little red squares. If we click on that, we see we're going to zoom all four views. Okay, we have this next one, which is zoom extents. If I click that, we see that it's going to, I was a little bit more zoomed in over here, so I click zoom extents and it centers the object a little bit more into the view. If I click and hold, we see we have another option, a white box here, which, as we can read over here in the corner again, which this will always be like your tooltip place, so we can always see what things are named. So we have zoom extents and then zoom extent selected. So let's see if we zoom in. So that one is doing basically the same thing as this one. Okay, but let's say that all these guys are here, okay, and we click zoom extents, so it zeroes out this one right here, and the one next to it is zoom extents all, which, as we see, will zoom everything in. We also have our field of view tool, which is hard to see exactly what this is doing when you just have one object, but this represents the camera depth of field. If anybody is familiar with cameras and how you have the field of view option on the camera, that's what this is essentially going to do. I'm going to go back to maximize viewport toggle, or hit Alt W. Okay, and then we have our pan, which obviously is going to it's not moving the object, it's just moving the view. And then we have rotate, which by default will be set to the arc rotate. And then we see we've got three other options here. And just for now, what I want to recommend to you is that you click and hold and set it to the yellow one, which is where mine was by default. And I'll come back and explain that more later on, but just trust me that the yellow one's the best one, and same thing here, set it to the white one. Okay, I'll explain those more later. Okay, so we can see all these tools have these little arrows in their corners, which obviously mean that there are more options. Just like up here and here, we have these little arrows in the corner. We can click and hold and we get these more options. If there's no arrows, then there's no more options. Okay, so what I want you to get a feel for now is, as you can see, we got our move tool up here and we have our camera tools down here, and it could be very time consuming. It might not seem like it would be, since all you're doing is really just moving the mouse around. But it really can be time consuming if you are not using hotkeys to do this, because you'd be coming up here, move, come down here, rotate, come down here, move again, come down here, rotate again, go over here to move. It can be very frustrating, very time consuming to be doing this a lot. And this is where our hotkeys come in. Now the hotkey for our first tool here, the zoom, is just simply rolling our middle mouse button. If you're rolling your middle mouse button and nothing's happening, just make sure that you're actually clicked in the view. Sometimes you can be clicked on outside of an object. Different things can happen. Just make sure that you just press the left, the right, the middle mouse button, anything, to be sure that this view is active. And then when you roll the middle mouse button, you'll actually be zooming. What's important to note about this is, as we can see, I'm zooming in at these increments. Okay, and if I hold down Control, those increments are going to cut in half. So there is the increments at which I'm zooming from basically two units, from here to here. Okay, and now if I hit Alt, we see that it cuts it in half. I actually get an additional unit of zoom out of it. Okay, so that's good to know. And then Control will actually double it. So we see that by holding Control, it's doubling that zoom. Alt is going to cut it in half. Then just our normal roll, and then holding Control is going to double that zoom. Okay, so it's good to know for our zoom. Okay, the next one that's important, I'm going to make sure my object is selected here, and that is going to be to access our rotate tool for camera tool. And again, I'm going to use my middle mouse for this, but this time I'm going to hold excuse me, Alt down. And as I'm pressing Alt down, I'm now going to press down the middle mouse button. I'm not going to roll it, I'm going to press it down. And now when I move the mouse, we see that I am zooming around this object. So I can let go of Alt and press the middle mouse. And now you notice that my hand tool has appeared. So that's the hotkey to get to our pan tool. So just pressing the middle mouse button down as a button and moving our mouse is going to access the pan tool. And notice that my move tool is still active. If I came down here and activated the pan tool, notice move tool no longer is active. I can still move it, but I've got to come back up here to activate that again. This way I can just press the middle mouse button and my move tool is automatically active for me. So rolling the middle mouse with Control and Alt is going to give us our zoom options. Pressing the middle mouse button and moving the mouse is going to access the pan tool or the move camera tool, whichever way you want to look at it. And then pressing the middle mouse button and holding Alt is going to activate the rotate. Now, one of the things that you want to get very familiar with and accustomed to is actually having your left hand on the keyboard when you are using Macs, because of this hotkey to rotate your object around. Now obviously this is a sphere and it's not that big of a deal, but when we start making complicated shapes, we want to make sure that our object is looking correctly from all views, and you want to constantly be rotating. And you'll notice that as my tutorials progress and as you continue working through them, you'll start to see how much I rotate. It's not because I am obsessive compulsive. It is a just innate aspect that I need to make sure that I'm very aware and very familiar with my 3D shape in all views, because this is basically just a 2D image. The only thing that tells me this is 3D is how it looks and the fact that I can rotate around it. That is what clues me in to it being 3D. But if I just look at it as it is, it's just 2D. Excuse me. So, having your left mouse, your left hand on the keyboard and your right hand on the mouse is very, very important uh, body posture to maintain as you're using this program, and any program really. If you wish to get to the professional level, really in any program, you're going to want to become familiar with the hotkeys of that program, and because it's just going to make your life faster, more efficient. So we're going to go ahead, and so that is our basic creation of objects. That is our camera tools, basic navigation of the interface. Down here we have a time slider for animation. We can see there's 100 frames currently on our timeline. And we have we see that it's the X, the Y, and the Z position, or coordinates for this object. Notice that if I go to my rotate tool, that this is going to say something different. Okay, so if I rotate it a little bit here, so now and go back to move, we're going to be seeing where this object is positioned in the world as far as movements go. So on the X, the Y, and the Z, this is where it is. If I go to rotate, and we can see that this is its current position inside of X, Y, and Z as it relates to rotation. And then same thing with the scale, we see that it all reads 100. So which means that this object has not been scaled yet. It is at 100% its normal size. If I scale it down, we see now that the entire object has been scaled half as much. And so I'm going to hit Control Z, let's get this back to normal. So if we want to cut it in half, we just come down here and type in 50. Now it's half the size. I'm going to undo again. You want to make it twice the size, you come down here and you type in 200. So you can get very particular about it like that. Set it back to 100% of its size. So we have access to our tools, and we can see that we can make adjustments to these our objects by manipulating these sliders down here as well. Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about before I leave you in this series is that right-clicking on these spinners, notice, is going to set the value back to 0. So if I know I want to set it back to 0, I can just right-click on the value. But what is important to know is that while this is going to set the value back to 0 here, I want you to think of it more in terms of right-clicking on the spinner is going to set the value to its lowest possible value. For example, I'm just going to come over here real quick and show you for segments. If I right-click on it, notice the lowest it can go is the 4. It can't go below 3. This is as low as it possibly can go and still be considered a primitive object, a sphere, if you will. But radius can go down to 0. Hemisphere obviously can go to 0, but segments can't. So just think of it as it is the lowest possible, resetting this value to its lowest possible size is what right-clicking any spinner will do. So we have our move tool, which the shortcut is W, and then our rotate tool, which the shortcut is E, and on a keyboard, and then scale is R. So W, E, and R. And why rotate is not R is because, well, it's meant to be, it's just easier the way that these 3 keys are lined up on the keyboard. It gives you easier access to do these. If this was move and then E was scale and then R was rotate, it might seem weird. Who knows? But you actually could change that if you wanted to. If you really insisted that R was rotate, you can make it that way. Just wonderful little thing here called Customize User Interface. You can go in there and set Max up to be and to work the way you want it to work. So we have move, rotate, and scale, and W, E, R give us the access to those keys, to those commands. And we have the rotating, scaling. Notice how my rotate tool is reacting if my object isn't selected. Notice it is like it's rotating around the whole little scene here, but if I select on the object, I'm now rotating around that object. This comes back to why the yellow one is the best one. So anyway, that is the basics of the interface. Real kind of down low and dirty overview of it, and creating objects here. Obviously, all of our objects can be created by just dragging out, moving the mouse in the scene. We're going to cover this a little bit more in the next video. So I'm going to go ahead and leave you for now with this. I appreciate you watching this first part, and I'll see you next time.